Welcome in to another edition of Kickin It on the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network, powered or fueled by Cody Road. We are not in the Wild Rose Casino and Resort Studios. We're actually at home because scheduling conflicts. We had a guest from TCU. We had to kind of shimmy stuff around. We got a lot of, we got a lot of good stuff from a TCU insider, didn't we? How you doing, Grant?
Your accent's a little stronger than his was, but
I'm playing it up a little bit. So yeah, we got the 247 reporter from Fort Worth down in Texas.
gives us some good insight.
Yeah, it was actually really good. So Kickin It is brought to you by Chandler Manufacturing. I apologize. I'm going to try and mute my microphone here and there because I had a little hay fever. People are using it's got to be using the Kelderman down corn reel to just kick up all this harvest dust, and it's found its way into my nose and lungs, which it's bad for me. But if people are harvesting all this corn, whether it's standing corn or it's down corn using the Kelderman Manufacturing down corn reel, it's good for them. It's bad for me.
It's kind of the season too, where allergies are kind of bad. But
so I'm going to try and cough directly into the microphone and snort as much as I can, just to make everyone here feel uncomfortable and those listeners feel uncomfortable. So Iowa State coming off a 50-20 loss at OU. We recorded Fart earlier today, and I'll bounce this off you, Grant. So Iowa State loses by 30. In the Ohio game, they lost by 3. My frustration level or disappointment level is substantially less for this one than it was for the Ohio game. Is that how your feelings resonate for it, or what's what are the vibes you getting after this one?
Yeah, I felt I'm not big on moral victories, but Oklahoma's a seasoned team. Iowa State's a young team, and
they bought their half their freaking roster.
Yep, they sure did.
I think 13 of their starters are new incoming transfers from other Power 5 schools into this year.
Hey, that's the world we're living in right now, So I get it. Campbell's stubborn, which I'm fine with. You recruit the right guys. You essentially telling yourself you don't need to go after guys in the portal. I came away feeling okay though. We were down. Iowa State was down. I think 21 point. It was 21-20 at one point, and then when Perkins got absolutely annihilated, it was 28-20, and that was really kind of the turning point. I felt like we're kind of I wouldn't say our luck ran out, but the tides had shifted, and yeah, Oklahoma turned it in, put it into gear.
Well, and one of the things about playing in Norman, that's a bitch to try and play in that stadium, and it's the fans are sitting right on you. It's a huge stadium. It's got, I think it's 80,000 seating capacity. The fans are extremely knowledgeable. And so when they need to be loud, they're going to be really, really loud. And then they're just going to sustain that noise for forever. And as much as it's annoying to everybody else, the band at Oklahoma and whether the game day productions and stuff, they know how to keep the energy in the stadium. So as one of Coach Pope's phrases, my running back coach from when I was there, is it's like a rolling ball of Butch and Avs. Like when that thing starts going, it's really hard to stop. And unless you're a really mature team, like in 2017 and even in 2019 when they almost won on that almost 2-point conversion, both of those teams were stacked with a bunch of veteran dudes who can kind of withstand the emotional wave. Well, the Iowa State offense had a sophomore center snapping to a freshman quarterback, handing to two different freshman running backs and 2 other sophomore running backs, throwing to a freshman tight end, and then a couple seasoned wide receivers, and wide receivers played pretty good. And then on the defensive side, you have a group of almost exclusively freshman linebackers with underclassmen on the defensive line. Most of them are underclassmen. And then you have 4 of your secondary players that are in, and Malik Verdun is out. So you have another guy that's in there. So this is a super, super young team, and in an environment like that, young teams then feel like when you get down by 8, every play has to be a touchdown. And then you get down by 14 or 15 or whatever it was, then every play has to be worth 15 points. And you start pressing to that, which is why the second half, it feels like one of those things of, hey, just relax. You cannot score more than 8 points in any one drive. Just relax. And I think that was the thing that they got caught up in the second half. Really the back part of the second quarter, when that thing started to roll, is they started trying to make every play the one that gets them back in the game or gets them back on top. And it felt like they were pressing. But the first half, that's what I sort of what I think the Iowa State team is going to be for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I really felt like, Iowa State was pressing, like you said, Oklahoma just they're on a different level. I mean, that offense is good. Dylan Gabriel's one of the better quarterbacks in the country. He's a punk, though. I will say that he's a punk.
Yes. So on the field, and this is just exclusively on the field. I texted a friend of mine who's actually from Oklahoma. He's an Oklahoma Sooner fan. I was like, Oklahoma is a damn good team, but they are a hard team to root for as a neutral party. Like if you're not actively rooting for Oklahoma, they're a hard team to root for. But I will say this. So like Oklahoma for the back half of the year, one is like two things can be true. One is when they're at their peak, and that playing against Iowa State, that was about as good as that team is going to look. There are a couple defensive lapses, like the Jaden Higgins touchdown, like that safety just whiffed. Like that was a bad play, and Iowa State made him pay for it. But when they're at their best, and Dylan Gabriel is able to be that efficient, that offense is damn near impossible to stop. However, if for whatever reason he isn't on, then this offense hinges around the fact that the quarterback is making on-time, accurate decisions and delivering the ball where it needs to go. If he's not, you're in turbo mode. And so let's say they go first down run in a situation where it's not like clicking. It's first down run, they gain 1 yard, 2nd and 9. They miss a pass because Gabriel might be a little bit off here or there. Now you're 3rd and 9. Now you got to wait for the routes to develop a little bit longer. You can't go in turbo pace. Well, the whole drive then, if you go even a first down or two and then you punt, the whole drive took 1 minute and 12 seconds because you're going that fast. So Oklahoma, they're either going to get on this crazy roll and just fly down the field all the time, or it's going to be, I mean, they haven't necessarily approached that yet, but the style offense that they play, if they run into a team that can match up with them outside and get a little bit of pressure on Gabriel, or if Gabriel's just fire, he just woke up and had a little bit of an off day, that offense hinges around the fact that the quarterback is going to be right. So don't be surprised. I mean, Oklahoma, Texas this week is a huge game. Huge game. Two best teams in the conference by a good ways. But whoever wins, it doesn't really matter. Don't be surprised if like week 9 or something like that, Gabriel gets a little bit dinged up, he hurts his ankle, and the next game, Oklahoma loses to, I don't know, Kansas or something like that, because again, everything revolves around the quarterback being good. And if he's not, that whole thing stops. But he was incredible on Saturday.
Yeah, and I hated that because he was so good. And after every play, he was chirping and he trucked over our safeties. And I was like, okay, like
that's not fun.
Made Iowa State safety look, get in the weight room, mate.
Isn't it? I don't know. And again, we talked about this a little bit, so I don't want to rehash too much of what we talked about in Fart, but Malik Verdun being out was one of the things that really hurt Iowa State. So how teams prepare is Oklahoma watched Oklahoma State film. And what were the things that got to Iowa State's defense that Oklahoma State did? It was running to the alley / outside away from Bo Freeler. Wherever Bo Freeler is, so if he's on the offensive right side, whatever your play call is, whether quarterback is to the left or running back ends up to the left, you're probably going to run that play to the left. You're not going to run it to Bo Freeler's side. Bo Freeler still had like a zillion tackles. But whoever the other person is, which at this point is Ben Nickel, awesome special teams player, decent or pretty good in pass coverage or pass situations, but in the run game, he's not quite up to snuff. He plays more like a corner in the run game than he does like a safety. So
he's not 6'4",
he's not 6'4", 220. And so like your Malik Verdun being on that side it's this, because of how much space this defense gives you, you have to be good in those alleys. So one is running to the alleys and whoever was in there, whether it's Ben Nickel or Jamison Patton or Deshaun Crawford, it doesn't really matter who is there, who is on the field, who's the opposite of Bo Freeler. They didn't fit as well as Malik Verdun, which is like, you didn't shoot as well as Klay Thompson. Like it's not a knock on them. It's just how good 7 is. And then the other thing is that they were trying to pick on, because the safeties had to be so committed to the run because they weren't as naturally good at it. Miles Purchase was in one-on-one land the entire game because the safeties couldn't just like back up and play whatever they wanted to. Because if Malik Verdun or Bo Freeler on either side, if they go backwards to try and stay behind something and realize it's a run, they can come up, run fit it, it's a 3-yard gain, big deal. So whoever the other safety is doesn't have that. So like this whole defense with Malik Verdun out, what Oklahoma State had success on, Oklahoma doubled down on, and we'll see if TCU is able to take advantage of it, and also what Seven's health is coming into this year or coming into this week, because they're going to have to either make some changes schematically on what they're doing if he's not able to go, or they're going to have to demand a lot more, find somebody who's a lot better in the run fits for that safety position than what they've been getting so far.
Yeah, and I saw that Verdun was out there a couple times. I'm not sure why he.
I think he's got a load management thing because it's a strained muscle is what his injury was. I don't think groin or hamstring, and so like I think they would just want to preserve the amount, especially because Oklahoma goes like this. So you put a guy out there and you can't substitute because they don't substitute and they're running a play every 5 seconds. That a strained muscle is very quickly going to snowball into something worse. So I'm guessing it was a load management issue why they didn't want to put him out there against that particular offense.
Yeah, well, hopefully, the trainers can get him going and we can get him back for TCU.
Get it going, Coberly.
Yeah. So let's dive into the special teams. Talk about the good or the bad first.
So let's statistics, hidden yards. What do we got? What do you think?
I was hoping to miss this part of it. No, I'm just kidding. I feel like Iowa State got their ass kicked in a lot of the aspects of the game. Blocked punt too. That's gonna swing it. I'm gonna say that Oklahoma they punted once, I think. Kicked off a lot. I'm going to say that Oklahoma was plus 112.
Minus 42. Iowa State was minus 42 in hidden yardage. Now, the reason why that statistic is a lot closer is because you don't want to trot your kick return team out there 9 times. Not ideal. Put your kick return team out 9 times. Every single one of those was a touchback. So Iowa State started in the 25. The worst starting field position that Iowa State has on their own 20. They started no further back than their own 20 versus Oklahoma. Outside of interceptions and touchbacks, they started on their own 15, their own 21, and their own 17. So, and their own 37 was another one. So Perkins still did his job when once he actually got the ball off, which not exactly great. But either way, like the special teams en masse didn't do that poorly. And Contreras had another good week, even though the snap was shit, and still managed to bang the kick through. But the main thing that sticks out from special teams is the blocked punt.
Let's talk about the field goals first. So Contreras was 2 for 2, and I talked to one of my buddies during the game. Before his kick, I was like, man, Oklahoma's a tough place to kick. And then Contreras goes out there and kicks 2, and I responded back to him. I go, maybe I just sucked. Maybe I just sucked.
Maybe I'm not good at kicking.
It wasn't so much an Oklahoma thing as it was a Grant Mahoney sucked at Oklahoma thing. So the punt, the elephant in the room, the one that got blocked, really smart schematic game planning by Oklahoma. They had one guy coming through the line. Iowa State had 2 upbacks. The guy that they had coming through the line occupied, if you are Iowa State, if you're Perkins, Oklahoma's guy came to the line, occupied the right upback, which allowed the guy to come free from that right side to block it. And when you are attacking a right-footed punter, that is the way you want to go. Let me take it back for a second. So had the left upback taken the guy that came through the line, the right upback could have then shifted over and taken the guy who was bleeding through. And that's how it should have been blocked, since there was only 2 guys coming. But since the right upback occupied the rusher that was coming through the line, that's what allowed the other free guy to come through, shave off the upback's shoulder, and destroy Perkins. Now, when you go to block a punt, that is the way you want to go. When you are the team blocking the punt, you want to attack the kicking leg side, because if they are not able to get home as quickly as Oklahoma was, if you're able just to run by the guy, it's a lot easier to run by the punter and just stick your arm out to get a finger on the ball or get your hand on the ball or just completely avoid the punter. Whereas if you're coming from the punter's non-kick leg side, so in Iowa State's case and Perkins' case, if you're coming from the left side, you have to cross the punter's body,
which is a huge risk.
Huge risk, because if you don't
you hit his leg, because it's roughing if you hit that up leg.
Yep, which is that's why it's easier to come from the punting side. like I said, just to stick your hand out, or in this case, just absolutely destroy the punter.
And then luckily he chucked it through the back of the end zone, which was nice.
Yeah. So I think it was something smart that Oklahoma saw on film, but I think they'll be cleaned up by Iowa State. It should be. The guy that did block it, he was slightly delayed too. So it's a bang play. So you can't blame Iowa State's outbacks for not shifting over, not taking those guys. But I think that is something that needs to be cleaned up in the in the film room. If you see someone coming through from the right side, no one from the left side, the left outback has to take that guy. So then the right outback can collect anybody outside of that guy.
Yeah, that up back. So the easy way to solve that is just like, don't leave any secrets. That's one of the things about blocking for special teams, especially on punt, is don't leave a secret. Literally point at the guy you're going to block. Be like, I've got number 42. And so one of the things, because Shane Burnham was the one that was coaching our special teams and was very good at communicating this, was I don't care who you block. I mean, there's obviously rules, but like, I don't care who you block. As long as everybody blocks one, we're all blocked up. Meaning if a guy is slightly off, then I point at the guy that's on the line of scrimmage and say, I'm blocking him. And if I'm the guard, the person that's right next to the punter, I say, I'm blocking him. And then the tackle says, I'm blocking this next guy. Well, if there's one person in between them, then the upbacks know that guy is unaccounted for. I'm going to block him. Yep. And so then you just communicate. It doesn't really matter who you have. You just have to be really demonstrative in blocking that. Because I don't give a shit if you know that I'm blocking you. Like there's only one punter, and he's going to get the ball off in 2 seconds. Like you don't have time to do a swim move or a spin move to try and get to the punter. If I stop your momentum, point blank period, ball's gone. So the ability to like make it a secret doesn't really change too much of the effectiveness. So like just being really communicative of I've got this guy, I've got this guy. It feels like that there's an easy communication mechanism because it's just the Shield's job to make you right. And they just might not have gotten that communication down. It's also really freaking loud. So if they just do everything audibly of saying, I've got 26, I've got 26. Well, dude's 7 yards behind me, let alone 2 feet behind me, can't hear that. So yeah, it is an operational thing that could be cleaned up if they need to. Yeah.
And you kind of touched on, not to bounce around, but you kind of touched on the field goal too about, there was a bad snap in there. And I'd mentioned it in the last pod that we've kind of got a snapping issue going on right now, but I'm really glad that Contreras bounced back, and I'm glad that Perkins bounced back too. I was afraid that as hard as he got hit, that he might have been injured. I mean, punters don't get touched very much, so
it's a tough kid.
He's a tough kid.
Man.
I'm surprised he played hockey. It looks like he kind of has a look of maybe a hockey player.
Oh, I mean, you look like a hockey player, or like a goalie, just underneath the pads.
Goalies in hockey, actually, they are pretty skinny sometimes. You think goalies are kind of fat, but it's like, no, they gotta be skinny and limber.
Super skinny.
Yeah. So that's really all I've got for, there wasn't a whole lot for as far as returns go. Like you said, they're all touchbacks. We had some punts that, just fair caught. So there wasn't, outside of the block punt, there wasn't a whole lot of like, I guess, special teams.
They held their own for the most part. Good field goals. Yeah, special teams wise. I mean, we talked a lot about it on Fart about what happened for the rest of the game. So I think the more meat of the bones on the show. I mean, so we can talk about like TCU. Like, what are your expectations? I mean, because we record this segment after talking to. Let's actually save that. Let's just give the audience an idea of what we're going to be talking about, and then we'll close it out afterwards. So this is going to be Jeremy Clark with 247. This is going to be the Goldfinch Athletics interview of the week. Also with Goldfinch Athletics, we are running a partner week special. So if you're near either our Ankeny or Huxley location, we have a free week. Everything is done with a buddy. So if you want to come in and just try, exercise for the first time, whether it's first thing off the couch or kind of challenge yourself to something new. For our adult fitness classes, we have those. They are, like I said, partner week. Go to goldfinchathletics.com if you want to register. So we're going to be Jeremy Clark with TCU's 247 on Kickin' It.
All right, we welcome in now Jeremy Clark with 247 covering TCU. Jeremy, thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
You bet, guys. Looking forward to it.
I feel like you have very rare qualifications because you've been covering TCU since a while. So we were talking kind of before we started recording. You just missed LaDainian Tomlinson. Like that's kind of that's the level of consistency we're bringing onto the program.
Yeah, I mean, LT, anyone that's covered TCU or even been a fan of TCU, I mean, he's the guy. He's the dude. he is TCU's version of LT. Everyone thinks Lawrence Taylor, but TCU, when they hear LT, they're thinking of LaDainian Tomlinson. But I did see – I was actually – crazy story, as a fan, I was in the stadium the day he rushed for 406 yards against UTEP. So that was crazy. And the crazy thing about LT, and this goes back all the way to Gary Patterson, how he recruits these 2- and 3-star players and developed them. LT, I think, had 3 total offers out of high school. So just another feather in the cap for ex-TCU coach Gary Patterson to have a guy that was lowly recruited end up doing big things. NFL Hall of Fame, matter of fact.
Yeah, that's
not to make you feel like a second choice, Jeremy, but I did reach out to LaDainian Tomlinson first to see if he would jump on. I did not get a response.
Well, hopefully I don't disappoint.
Yeah, LT. When I was in junior high, I wanted to do the head behind hand behind the head, kind of a little flick, just the coolest touch, the cleanest touchdown celebration of all time. Was not near as athletic as LaDainian Tomlinson. Different running styles. I was a lot more Jaworski Lane, a lot less LaDainian Tomlinson. So you've been covering, I guess there's a couple things that TCU just as a storyline is really interesting for me from last year to this year, because there's so much that was lost from last year's national runner-up team. Duggan, gone. Quentin Johnson, gone. Your Miller, the running back, gone. Miller. The offense coordinator, gone. They've been brought back in, or the offense isn't, nothing, but they've not had the same explosive success. What are the expectations of TCU fans relative to this past year, and how have they been taking this season, because it's not undefeated, blowing teams out, or this crazy offensive explosion like it was last year?
Right. I mean, the expectations are high. I mean, after you play in the national championship game, the level's going to be raised, the bar's going to be raised high. And just looking at this year's version of the offense, you're right. They lost a lot of big names. You lose Duggan, the Iowa native. You lose Kendre Miller. You lose Quentin Johnston, first-round draft pick. But one name you didn't mention, and it's a name that I always bring up, because I think when we look at football games, guys, you look at the trenches. You look at your offensive line, defensive line. Steve Avila was a humongous loss for this team last year as an offensive lineman. He's a guy that could play center, could play guard. He was a second-round pick. Alongside Steve, you had Alon Ali, who actually played center for TCU last year. He played in 6 years of college football. He was a 6-year, had that COVID year, played 6 years of college football, played 5 years at SMU, followed Sonny Dykes and his staff over to TCU when they came over. And then you had Wes Harris, who was another 5th or 6th year senior that was playing right guard. So you think about that interior of the offensive line. They played God, my math's terrible, but I'm thinking probably around 150 games collectively in their careers. And so when you look at some of the things that TCU's missing on this year, you got to really start up front. You look last week, pop in that West Virginia game, and you're going to see an offensive line that just purely got dominated. But I look at what Kendall's done. Kendall Browse, the new offensive coordinator, he wants to run the football. He wants to get the tight ends involved, does a lot of 11 and 12 personnel. If you look back at when Baylor was in their heyday, 2014, 2015, when they were running the football well, and they were also throwing vertically to KD Cannon and Corey Coleman, those speedster guys, that's kind of what he's wanting to bring to TCU. They just don't have those weapons at receiver right now, and they're not really deep along the running back group besides Amani Bailey. And you have an offensive line that really isn't inexperienced right now. So to make this long answer shorter, I think the expectations coming into the season, I think we're a little bit higher. And right now, the biggest question mark right now, especially after that loss to West Virginia last week, is where the heck is the identity on offense? What is this team?
Yeah, because you lose. It's like the first family of offense is the Riley brothers. You lose half of that, and then you bring in, the bringing in a Bryles. If you remove the personal stuff that happened at Baylor, kind of the off the field stuff, which that is another storyline, but the way that they ran offense, if I could design an offense, it would be that one, because it makes so much sense. And so the difficulty of implementing that, because you talk about, guys like KD Cannon and Coleman and, who all the rest of the quarterbacks, doesn't matter which quarterbacks or all the rest of the receivers, doesn't matter which quarterback's thrown to them. You spread the field. It's like what Tennessee's doing with Josh Heupel. It's a ton of spacing. It's a ton of vertical threat. And you got to have a quarterback that can run around enough to make it a reasonable threat. But the defense has to defend 52.5 and like everything all the way to the end zone. Has that just, you're mentioning it's kind of the wide receivers and offensive line. Have there been times when that offense has clicked, or has it always been sort of like a hit or miss the entire season?
It's kind of been hit or miss the entire season. I don't think we've had a game where we've seen them put it all together. If you go back and look at that Colorado game, they scored a lot of points. They lost 45-42. They had 562 yards of total offense. So at that point, you're thinking, okay, this is a team that clicked. But you also look at that game and you saw Chandler Morris throw 2 interceptions in the red zone. One was at the 5-yard line, and then you saw them miss a field goal. So they're immediately missing 17 points off the board if they just make good decisions. And really, both those receivers were wide open on those plays where he threw those interceptions. And Travis Hunter just did a phenomenal job of baiting him into one of those interceptions. But there's been times this year where they are so good between the 20s. And then once they hit that red zone, it's mistake after mistake, whether it's a play call, whether it's execution. The kind of the running thing that we look at right now as the media for TCU and even as a fan base is when they get in these shorter situations, they're running a jet sweep or they're trying to do a reverse, and all of a sudden a second and short becomes a third and long, or a first and short becomes a second and long. And I tell everyone, I give Kendall Browse before this West Virginia game, I was giving him a pretty good A, high A, mid A. You want to talk numbers, I give him a 90 average. But overall, I think you got to look at the inconsistencies with them in the red zone. They're not producing, whether it's turnovers on downs. There's just something that hasn't clicked for them offensively for them to generate points. And even going back to last week against West Virginia, I'm sitting there in the press box at halftime, scratching my head, trying to figure out how in the heck is this game not 28-7 at this point? There's just so many things being left on the field, and what we say, meat on the bone. There's so much meat being left on the bone for this offense right now. And Sonny Dykes, I mean, he'll tell you straight up that the offense is not clicking. They're not consistent. We don't know if it's a receiver rotation. We don't know if it's Chandler being mostly inconsistent. Last week, we figured out pretty early it was the offensive line that was just getting blasted. Your leading rusher in the Big 12 averaged 2.9 yards per carry, and you gave up 5 sacks. So that should tell you right there the offensive line struggled mightily against West Virginia. So it's tough to put a finger on it, but I would definitely say through 5 games, this offense is definitely hit or miss. And even Sonny Dykes said today, we don't have an identity on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and seeing the score of the West Virginia game was surprising me. People are saying that Neil Brown's fighting for his job, and TCU coming off of national championship game. I expected TCU to win the game, and obviously it didn't. But you've talked about Chandler Morris, and correct me if I'm wrong. He started the year last year, got hurt, and then Iowa native Max Duggan came in, took college football by storm. What more can you tell us about Chandler Morris? What kind of style does he have? Is he a dual threat, or does he like to sit back in the pocket?
Chandler is a definite dual threat guy. If you look at his highlights from high school, he ran for a lot of yards, threw for a lot of yards, played for one of the more prominent high school programs in Texas at Highland Park there in Dallas. And really what led him to win in the quarterback battle last year was just the consistency through fall camp. If you talk to Sonny Dykes, they just said there was way more consistency with the offense. It clicked more with Chandler Morris. And then obviously you go out there and start against Colorado. He struggled a little bit, started to make some plays in the second half, and then boom, he gets hurt. And who would have known? I mean, I covered Max for a long time, ever since he was at Lewis Central there in Iowa, Council Bluffs. So I always knew Max had talent, but I'd be lying to you if I told you he's going to make it to New York and be a Heisman candidate, because there was plays during Max's career where you're just like, man, that kid can do anything he wants to. He can make any throw. He's got the heart of a lion. But there's other times you just scratch your head and just say to yourself, how in the world is this guy starting a quarterback? So when you look at Chandler, it wasn't one of those deals where you're thinking he's going to have to set the world on fire to be better than Max. He had already proven that last year. He's got a good arm. He's shown flashes. Against Colorado, he struggled. Against Nichols, he was almost perfect. He went 26 of 30, Two of those incompletions were drops. So he could have essentially been 28 of 30. You go down to Houston, he completes the deep ball, throws 2 beautiful touchdown passes, starts running more. That's one thing that he did not do against Colorado. He wasn't confident. He's coming off a major injury, and everyone that follows football knows a lot of that coming back from an injury, a lot of it has to do with your mental state. And he just didn't have that confidence to go out there and run the football. And so against Nichols, he started to make those plays more with his feet, got hit a couple times, got up, figured out, hey, I can get hit and not get hurt. So I'm good at this running the football stuff. Started to gain that confidence back a little bit more against Houston, ran really well against SMU. And actually last week against West Virginia, he ran really well. That third quarter, whatever happened to halftime, someone stole Chandler Morris's body and put some frat guy's body in his suit. I don't in his uniform. I don't know, because that wasn't the Chandler Morris that we had seen the last 3 games and really against the first half of West Virginia. So I think he's definitely a dual threat. Struggles a little bit throwing the deep ball. Stays in the pocket a little bit too long sometimes. That's kind of a weakness for him too. But when he's running the RPO and he's making reads, you've got to be aware of him, because he's a guy that can turn a 10-yard gain into a quick 30-yard gain and maybe even run it in for a 30-yard touchdown. He's got that kind of ability.
Well, that's what really killed Iowa State. Last week we had chances for to stop Oklahoma, and Dylan Gabriel just take off running, and he had like two rushing touchdowns, and
including trucking a safety, which was cool. That was fun. It's good to watch when you get a safety trucked on the 2-yard line. I think the last thing that I was curious about on the offense. So Jared Wiley, I was looking for Nick because as a tight end, he's kind of the prominent receiving threats or prominent offensive weapons from last year to this year that stayed. Has his production been like, how has his production changed from last year to this year beyond like just the straight box score stuff?
I mean, Kendall Browse wants to get the tight ends involved. That's the first thing we learned when we went out to spring camp and started watching that offense. You learned there's going to be more tempo. They're going to run, I think right now they're ranked 2nd or 3rd in the nation in plays per minute. So the tempo was definitely going to change. But the second thing that immediately stood out to me was how many passes were going toward the tight ends. Jared Wiley, you guys up at Iowa State love tight ends.
Damn straight we do.
Typically, 6'6", 6'7" tight ends. You guys have 3 of them, and they keep coming. But Jared kind of reminds me of those old Iowa State tight ends. He's just a big physical guy, has kind of deceptive speed. He does a good job of getting open. But what I like about Kendall is just the involvement of the tight end, because there for a while, tight end was like Bigfoot. You didn't know if it existed or not. For TCU's offense, because they never really utilized them. But that's what Kendall Browse does a very good job at, is utilizing Jared. He had 2 touchdowns against SMU. Chase Curtis is another guy to keep an eye on, guys, because Chase has kind of stepped in to fill in that role behind Jared. He's another 6'5", close to 6'6" kid, 235, 240. Not very fast. He's not as fast as Jared, but he can get open. He can make plays. He's a very good blocker. Another athletic guy. So they're going to put some size out there at tight end. You're going to see them run some 12 personnel and get both those guys involved.
So looking at the transfer portal, I know TCU brought in a bunch of guys this year, like 14 or 15 guys, most of them on the offensive side. One of the guys is Trey Sanders from Alabama, who I think was one of the top, running backs in his class. But we've already talked about, the leading rusher for TCU, Imani Bailey. So I guess my first question is, what's going on with Sanders? Is he hurt? Is he just outplayed? And secondly, what does Bailey bring to the table?
Starting with Sanders, he came off some pretty significant injuries at Alabama. Didn't play a whole lot. Everyone kind of remembers the car crash. He was, had a setback with that. Why is it Alabama? He was the number 1 guy in his class. I think he was. I might think he was the number 1 overall recruit at one point. But, when he got to TCU, fall camp was really, really good, made some good plays, but they started to kind of have to do some load management with him. They didn't want to put too much on him. And so that's kind of carried over to the real games. They'll bring him in certain situations. He's a hard runner. He's not going to run past anyone. He will try to jump over someone. He's hurdled a couple guys this year, but
it's like you, Grant.
he's an athletic back, but there's a reason why Amani Bailey starts. Amani Bailey is kind of the electric guy of this offense. He's kind of the Swiss Army knife at running back. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball. He's a very good blocker. And what I like about Amani Bailey is he just doesn't hesitate. He gets the ball. He tries to find the running lane as fast as he can. He's not going to dance around. He's not a real big, tall guy. He's 5'9", maybe 205, but he will try to run over people. But he's got that speed about him. He's got some explosiveness. He can break off a 75, 80-yard run at the drop of a hat. And so I think when you look at his production this year, it was very disappointing when you look at West Virginia's box score from last week, because he only averaged 2.9 a carry. And prior to that, he was averaging nearly 7 yards per carry. And I really don't put a lot of that blame on him. I put it more toward the play of the offensive line. But Amani Bailey is right now, if I was to name a guy that has been the biggest surprise to me this year, I would definitely put him at the top of the list, just because he's made so many plays and he's becoming a fan favorite. And there's been 2 games already where he's carried the ball more than 20 times this year. And when you talked to Sonny Dykes before the start of the season, this was going to be the phrase we all hear, running back by committee, or whatever position by committee. And it has been anything but by committee with Amani Bailey. He's become that guy. He's the featured back. And right now he's the thing that makes TCU's offense go.
So defensively, flip over to the other side of the ball. Is it Hodges is the neck roll guy? Did he get fired? Did he get fired, or is he?
No. So Hodges, I know we talked about this before. Hodges is he's listed as day-to-day, but I don't think he's going to be back for another few weeks. I haven't
seen him out there.
Yeah, and it's kind of been a big loss for them. He's not the fastest, he's not the biggest, but I would say if you look at football, you want to find instinctive players.
You want to find a middle linebacker with a neck roll. That's what you want to find.
Yeah, he's your classic Big Ten linebacker. Just plays between the tackles really well. Kind of where his struggles are outside the box, where he has to cover some slot receivers, but he's very instinctive, makes a lot of plays. I mean, he was preseason all Big 12 for a reason. So that's been kind of a big loss. But I'll tell you what, Shad Banks is, if you go back to that 2021 class, you look up Shad Banks on 24/7 and you're going to see a 4-star receiver. Oh, he's 6'1", 250 pounds now.
That's a big receiver.
Yeah, he went to A&M, lasted a semester, and decided I want to transfer. And he transferred in when Gary Patterson was still the coach, and they immediately made him into a linebacker because he was so athletic, and he played some defense in high school. But Shad is another. I think if his instincts were as good as Johnny, he would probably be the starter. But he's more athletic. He's going to be able to cover receivers at the slot. He's going to be able to cover running backs out of the backfield. He's a hard hitter. If you remember 2 years ago when TCU, when they parted ways with Gary Patterson and they played top 10 Baylor that week, and no one expected TCU to go out there and win that game, lo and behold, they upset them. Well, the guy making the final play of the game to secure the win for TCU was Shad Banks. He intercepted the pass from Baylor. And so he's played quite a bit of football the last 2 years. He's not – people ask, is without Johnny out there, is it a huge drop-off? I really don't consider it a huge drop-off. And I love Johnny Hodges. I love those hard-nosed players that just love to go out and play football. He's got a great story. No, he transferred from the Navy. No one wanted him. No, absolutely no one wanted Johnny Hodges. But the 2 teams he had his best games against when he was at Navy, SMU and Tulsa. Well, SMU, Sonny Dykes was the coach. At Tulsa, Joe Gillespie was the defensive coordinator. So when they see his name pop up in the transfer portal, we got to get that guy. He's coming here. They offered him, and Johnny played coy about it, but he told us all at media one day, I knew I was going to TCU, but I had to act cool like I had 20 other offers, but I knew I was going to TCU as soon as they called me. But Johnny's a good kid, and we love him in the media because he tells it how it is. I mean, he will not hold back, and I think right now as a leader, it's kind of hurting their team overall, but I really feel confident with how Shad Banks is playing in his role right now.
You got to love those military guys. I feel like they're all just, they're usually hard-nosed dudes. So that shouldn't be a surprise that, one of your better linebackers transfers into a military guy. So you had Johnny Hodges, and I see last game, Jamoy, is that how you pronounce his first name? Jamoy Hodge.
Yeah, Jamoy Hodge
was your leading tackler. So Hodges out, Hodge in. What's your guys'? I know TCU. Trey Tomlinson was a stud for you guys last year, and I feel like the D-backs as a whole was, they were a really strong part. I mean, TCU was good all over last year, but I feel like the D-backs were a really strong part of TCU's game last year. How are the the cornerbacks and the safeties this year?
Well, if you take away Colorado, they've played really, really well. Against Colorado, it was not a
what the hell happened? Was it like overlooking somebody, or is it just like granted, to be fair, you have no idea what they're going to bring to the table because you're watching Jackson State film kind of with some other stuff kind of, but like, yeah, I was just curious, like, what the hell happened with that game?
The best way I could describe that game against Colorado is, imagine when you're preparing for a team, you have to watch film. Where they're watching Colorado, they're watching 500 feet of film because you have new coaches, you have so many new players. So you have to watch so many different schools, so many different schemes. You have to watch so much film. Nebraska had to watch 10 feet of film. USC, 10 feet of film. They all had one game of film to prepare on, whereas TCU, like you said, Jeff, they're coming into it sight unseen. They really don't know what they're running into. They know kind of the schemes, but they don't know player personnel. They didn't. I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I did not think Shedeur Sanders was going to throw the ball like he did. But Shedeur Sanders threw the ball really well, made really good decisions. They didn't get a lot of pressure on him, which, I don't know if that would have changed the game. But it's like I said at the beginning of the show, as bad as they played, they still had a chance to win that game on the final drive. Same thing last week against West Virginia. That's the difference this year compared to last year. If you look at last year's schedule, guys, they weren't blowing out anyone. They beat Oklahoma pretty good, and they beat Iowa State pretty good. But if you look at other games, go back and watch those games.
Yeah, it was comeback games. And it was Duggan being a dude in the second half.
That team that made it to the national championship team very easily could have been 8-4, 7-5. So the fortune that they had last year has been completely flipped. Now you're losing those games that you're driving in with a chance to win late in the game. But when we looked at this season, back to your question about defense and how they've played the secondary, that was the strength. They had 7 guys returning from last year. Everyone thought, okay, well, if Kendall Browse can show some sort of offense, they're going to be really good again. Well, we saw a lot of deficiencies. We saw a secondary that didn't play well. Josh Newton didn't play well. The safeties didn't play well. Absolutely no pressure from the defensive line. Now they kind of flipped the script. They played a lot better against Nichols, which is an FCS team. But what I really liked was how they played against Houston. It's a Big 12 team. Yeah, they're at the bottom of the Big 12, but it's still a pretty athletic team. They have athletic receivers. They have a serviceable quarterback in Donovan Smith. And then 2 weeks ago against SMU, I mean, if you look at SMU, you talk about TCU going heavy in the transfer portal. Their whole roster is transfer portal guys, almost like Colorado. I mean, they get pretty much any Dallas player that comes home from a P5 school, he's going to SMU most of the time. So their roster's pretty loaded. So for TCU to go out and win that game convincingly like they did by 17 points, that was what was real impressive to me. And it's so crazy because they had that momentum, won by 23 at Houston, won by 17 at home to SMU. You're going against a West Virginia team that can't score. They got a pretty decent defense, but then you go out there. Their defense did, a solid job. They gave up 21 points, which is more than West Virginia was averaging. But those games have been won this year because your offense has been averaging 38 points. But defense, they've gotten a lot better. I'll say that. They've gotten so much better from week 1 to where they are now. I think going into West Virginia, they were second in the nation in total sacks. I think they had 16. They didn't get any against West Virginia. They have dialed up some pressure. Gillespie's dialed up some different blitzes. Their defensive line, Paul, you're going to have to remember this name because it's hard to pronounce, but you're going to see his number. He's number 97. He looks like the first kid off the bus. His name is Paul Oyewale.
Oyewale?
Yeah, Oyewale. So he's a redshirt freshman.
Football name there.
Yes, he's a young guy. He's a redshirt freshman. He's physically probably the most impressive player on their roster. He just looks like he was built in a lab. But he's got 3 sacks already, so he's started to play really well. Dominic Williams is playing really well at nose tackle, but I think TCU's defense has started to play more consistently, and we're starting to kind of see an identity with them. And I think you'll see a good defense in Ames on Saturday. I think they're going to be able to limit the big plays.
And they play that 3-3-5, right? Like predominantly they're playing the Iowa State. They're playing the John Hancock defense.
Yeah, thanks to you guys. Everyone wants to run 3-3-5 now.
You're welcome.
And it's so funny because following the team as long as I have, I'm used to seeing TCU recruit. Gary Patterson would recruit
4-2-5.
Yeah,
we're in the 4-2-5 for forever. It's Gary Patterson's defense, 4-2-5. No matter what, you find the guys that fit 4-2-5. You're going to get stud corners, stud safeties. You're going to get a pass rusher that's going to be on one of the sides, and then just have some guys in the middle. But 4-2-5 always. You
have a guy. You're talking to a guy that's used to seeing defensive ends that were recruited that were 6'3", 210 pounds, and they got to 240, 235 in college, and 5'9" cornerbacks. Gary Patterson did not care how big his cornerbacks were. Now they recruit 6'1", 6'2". So everyone started to see success with the 3-3-5 at Iowa State, especially guys like Will McDonald, those big old defensive ends that they have, and now they're recruiting those 6'4", 6'5", 280-pound defensive end types. And so it's been crazy to see how quick the turnover has been from a roster standpoint to what it looked like 2 years ago.
So now, Jeremy, this is the time of the show. We get down to the meat potatoes. We are called
most important stuff of the show.
Because I'm a former kicker, and Jeff cut his teeth on special teams. So let's dive into it. What should we expect with TCU's kicker and punter?
Special teams. It hasn't been special for TCU this year.
Good to know. Hey, we got a punt block last week, so
I promise you. They had 3 missed field goals last week. There's a mutiny going on between the fan base and who they want back at punt returner right now, because the punt return game with JoJo Earl, an Alabama transfer, hasn't been really successful. Punting game's been average. They've struggled on special teams kickoff coverage. Special teams, like I said, it hasn't been very good at all right now. And I think last week, I will give Griffin some credit because he's attempted more 50-yard field goal attempts this year than he had his previous 4 years combined. So he's not known to have a big leg, but he's known to have accuracy. Those 2 kicks he had in the fourth quarter last week, there's no chance though they would have made it. They were kicked basically at the back of TCU players. They were going to be blocked no matter what. So I don't know if there's a confidence level in him right now where he's not feeling too good about himself. He could be the golfer on the tee box knowing he's going to hook it or slice it as soon as he tries to get up there for a perfect drive. I don't know. Kickers' mentalities are different from everyone else's. But, yeah, I would definitely say basically every phase of special teams is a very big concern for TCU right now.
It's good to know, man. It's good to know.
It is good to know because Iowa State has been good for the majority of the year, but
the misses have been huge. Like, that's the thing. So Iowa State has either been really, really good or absolute dumpster fire on certain plays. Like it's either a 57-yard punt or it gets blocked. There's no 36-yard punts. So it's never okay. It's always really, really good or really, really bad. So hopefully for Iowa State's sake, there's more good than bad. But, we're just looking for some made kicks and some damn good punts. That's what we're shooting for in this show.
That's right. Well, we appreciate your time, Jeremy. Thanks so much for hopping on with us. Do you have any parting words before we let you go?
I'm glad it's going to be cooler up in Iowa than it has been down here in Texas. I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to some good Iowa food and looking for a good ball game, man. I think both the fan bases really don't know what their teams are. So one of us will be in for a surprise by Saturday night around 10:30.
I'm not sure if you've seen too what
the New Jerseys, man. There.
Yeah, the uniforms that Iowa State's wearing.
So it's
look forward to that.
Yeah, they're nice. They're an homage to Jack Trice. It's the 100-year anniversary to him passing away. So yeah, they're pretty sweet jerseys.
Well, I've never been to a night game at Jack Trice. I've watched it on TV 100 times.
It'll be rocking.
I cannot wait to be part of that environment. I love I've watched when they beat number 2 Oklahoma State years ago when they had the 30-year-old quarterback Brandon Weeden. I can't remember was that Brandon Weeden, but I remember that atmosphere and just how loud it gets, and I'm looking forward to seeing that.
That was my senior night. Have you ever heard the song "Juicy Wiggle"?
My son probably has. I can't say that I have.
I don't think anybody outside of Ames has not, but you will. First touchdown in the second half, you're going to get a party across the entire stadium. It's a terrible song, but it makes your heart feel warm, and that's what matters.
So, in other words, I'm going to be singing it on the way home Sunday.
Yeah.
All right, well, appreciate you having on.
Yeah, thanks again. Thanks for hopping on with us. We appreciate your time.
You bet.
All right, that was Jeremy Clark. That was fun. I said, I mean, I started the show off a little drawl, but like that's an intoxicating accent.
Yeah, no, it is. He knowledgeable dude. I mean, he's been there since 2005, so he's seen some really, really good TCU.
Well, TCU really coming from like little tiny. I mean, it's in Fort Worth, so it's not BFE, but like little tiny BFE program to be like national title contender, despite the fact they got smacked by Georgia. But still, they got there. Nobody else did.
No, that would be cool to cover a team, for as long as he has, and to see their ascension from what they were to what they are now. They're obviously a little down this year from they were last year, but yeah, super insightful. Glad to have him on. Thanks again for him jumping on in his time. Like I said, try to get LaDainian Tomlinson, but
he said no.
He said, Grant, thanks but no thanks.
You know what we should have done is Coach Pope coached LaDainian Tomlinson at TCU.
Damn,
I should have reached out to Coach Pope.
We messed up, man.
Yeah, I screwed that up.
Next year.
All right. Well, thanks, Grant.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks again, and for all our loyal listeners who are still listening, remember, adopt, don't shop.